Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Craft Conversations, and we're here today with Katherine Walters. Katherine, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, thanks, Bruno. Well, I'm Katherine Walters. Up until 2018, was a jewelry maker here in Newfoundland and Labrador, specializing in different forms of wire knitting. And I live on Bell Island and had my studio out behind my house.
Oh, wow. That's pretty far. So you used to commute every day to town when you were working here?
Well, when I came into this making business sort of later in life, I'd been crafty all my life, but I actually started my own business. I left healthcare in 2016, took the plunge, couldn't wait for retirement to do it, and applied to the Kitty Bitty Village plantation because I might have been in my mid 50s, but I was sort of starting out at the beginning. And so for the first couple of years, I was commuting back and forth to Kitty Bitty every day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
In this conversation that we're going to have today, I approached you and said that I was doing conversations with other craftspeople and producers. And we are just having natural conversations about anything craft related. And you asked me, am I still qualified to be called a craft producer?
Yeah.
And I do think that you're still a crafts person no matter if you're practicing or not. So that was the main interest for me. I think you're a very qualified person to talk about craft.
You made my day, actually, when you contacted me. And when I asked you that question and you responded that way, it was like, oh, Bruno, big heart, right? No, it was, like I said, in April of 2016, I left healthcare. And in June of 2016, I started at the Kitty Bitty Village Plantation. And for just over 2 years, I was able to practice doing what I loved, and was actually in the process of moving out of the plantation, which I did in the end of February of 2018. And I had initiated conversation with the Economusée Network through Sue Furneaux, and was working towards setting up my home studio space. So I had a working space and sort of a public space, and had gone through the initial application process and was accepted, and was working with Susan to bring my space here sort of up to their standards so I could join their network. That would enable me to end my commuting and to work more from home and work more on my website, which was, good news to my partner. And and then in 2018, all that came to an abrupt halt when I had what they call a spontaneous coronary artery dissection. Basically, one of the main arteries in my heart spontaneously came apart and resulted in a couple of heart attacks. So the road to recovery has been long, and it's been partial. I don't have the stamina to do what I once did. So I dragged my feet for an extra year and didn't officially close my business down entirely, though I didn't make anything new last year. I sort of kept my insurance going and my website going all of last year, sort of toes and fingers crossed, hoping that maybe I'd get enough stamina to go back to something. But unfortunately, it hasn't worked out that way. I am now, a former jewelry artist who's looking for other ways to express her creativity. And it's an interesting thing because I was one of these people in healthcare my whole life who used to warn people about getting too wrapped up in what they do and allowing what they do to define who they are. And yet after only 2 years, little over 2 years being a full-time craftsperson, I was at such loose ends. I mean, once I started feeling a little bit better, I was 6 months before I could set foot in my studio.
Wow.
And I'm not normally a chicken shit, if you'll pardon the expression. But it's like, I was just so sad because I'd waited so long to do what I love, then all of a sudden I couldn't do that anymore. It's an interesting thing to be a craft producer who all of a sudden can't do what they do, because if I had stayed in healthcare, I would have had a nice, comfortable disability pension to sustain me. Now I'm dependent on Canada Pension, and the only reason that's even working for me at all is because I worked all those years in the public service and at contributions. I really don't know what becomes of full-time makers who have been small business people all their life if they're not making Canada Pension contributions.
Wow.
It has really given me pause for thought,
Yeah.
because I know I'm not the only one out there, I'm sure, who's struggling with some sort of disability.
Oh, for sure. Like there is a lot. And one thing that you mentioned that I think is very interesting is you always warned people not to go beyond their limits and what they do in terms of a daily life. And I feel that a lot of us crafts makers, artists, like we live on that life constantly. Like we always
Yes.
pushing ourselves to beyond our limits so we can make a living, we can exercise our passion, which is making art, making craft, and trying to survive from it. Did that change completely the way you think about what you have done different? Because like you had
Well,
an amazing business and it was fantastic.
thank you.
And as you said, like in 2 years, you grew to be known not only locally, but like nationally. Like a lot of people know your name. Like I tried to Google you yesterday, and oh my God, the amount of information about you that you can find on Google is amazing.
I worked at it. It's like, it's funny, the ferry system was in a real bad shape when I first started over at Kitty Vitty. So I used to have horribly long commutes to and from. So I bought the biggest data package I could for my phone. And if you look on my computer, how many product photos I took, actually in the lineup, or I'd wander around the wharf and the breakwater over in Portugal Cove, taking jewelry pictures and taking jewelry in progress pictures, in the car, and little videos and things like that. And it's funny, you don't even think of that as working because you're not actually at your bench. But I think a lot of craftspeople are like that. It's like they are constantly, we live in a world now where, and it's a mixed blessing, where, we are so interconnected. And as craftspeople, it's like you learn pretty quick that if you don't market yourself, nobody else can do that for you. And, the power of the smartphone has revolutionized how easily that happens. It's like, and I don't think most people who aren't makers appreciate just how multi-skilled makers have to be. Everything from how to take a good picture, how to edit a good picture, how to build your own website, how to make use of Instagram. Like, what's an Instagram worthy post? And this has nothing to do with twisting wire in my case. And it's the same for everyone else. But these are the kinds of things that modern crafts makers kind of have to do. The public wants to connect with you. They want to see how you spend your time. They want to get an appreciation for what goes into creating what you make. And by doing that sort of work and getting that out there, you not only, increase the volume of information that's out there about you on Google and what you do, but you also, I think, help shape the perception of what your work is worth.
Right.
And if there's one thing I did learn in 2 years, is that actually means something. That means a lot. And I know I certainly didn't have a good appreciation for exactly how complex that was before, I dipped my feet in that pool. And, now that I'm home and I've got time on my hands, I know, especially during the winter, I'm pretty well housebound except for medical appointments. And so every time I see a post by a fellow maker, I share it and beat it to death, because it's like, as I look for ways to contribute, that's one thing I can do. I can write a decent post and share somebody's stuff. And once in a while, I actually get to see how somebody on my friends list comments and follows up with the maker to buy something. And I get warm, tingly feelings when that happens, because it's like, good, I could, use my superpowers for good, even from the corner of the living room.
So
But
pretty,
I am grateful to still be connected to this community, though, in
so,
so many ways.
so pretty much like you stop being an active crafts maker in the sense that you're not producing, but you're still a crafts maker in your heart, and you keep pushing that community forward.
Well, I haven't ruled out going back and dabbling a little bit with wire, but I know that, I've been catching up on a few old quilting projects that have been sitting on the shelf for a few years over the winter, and I break into a sweat trying to cut out bias binding. So, everything for me is very physical now, and I really do have to pace myself. So, I mean, I won't stop doing stuff because it's in my nature. To be a production crafts person, I know I don't have the stamina for that anymore. Not now, not with the heart that I have. And I recently got a second diagnosis of a rare lung condition that it's a degenerative long-term lung condition. So I now have a second strike. So any illusions I had about maybe getting a new heart and maybe being able to resurrect this kind of got shelved for now. I'm focusing on squeezing as much joy as I can out of each day. So, don't feel sorry for me because I survived and I beat the odds and I'm still here and I'm still doing what I'm doing. And I've got a pile of fabric that needs to be ironed into bias bonding over there. And I don't know if you can see this, but see my windowsill?
Yeah.
Every windowsill in my house, I've been trying to sprout apple seeds and wild roses from seeds over the winter in my fridge. That was one of my projects. So, I'll keep doing what I'm doing, and if somehow medical science can help me squeeze out a little more endurance, I mean, who knows what I'll do next? But
Right.
I also have to be realistic. So I decided that if I can't be a full-time maker, I'm going to be the best cheerleader I can possibly be for other makers.
It's very touching, Catherine. Like, I think most of the makers that I know, they had like a previous life. They worked somewhere else, or they're still doing like two jobs at a time, the job that pays your bills and the job that you love to do. um,
And I did,
and-
and I did that from 2012 to 2016. For 4 years, I got up at the crack of dawn every Saturday morning so I could get over to the St. John's Farmers Market, which is where I got my start.
and
So I feel for folks like that too.
now, as you said, like with the conditions that like nature imposed to you, like that shift your life and shift your thought process into like craft and what that means. And I feel there's pretty enjoyable is the word that you said, that craft still brings you joy, and that you're gonna continue doing that. uh
Mm-hmm.
what was the biggest impact for you on that like big change between like doing something that was paying your bills to actually getting to something that you love to do it, and doing so well in a short period of time, and then having to stop that and move forward?
I think that I was just initially I was really, really sick. So I guess the reality of the future I was facing took a while to sink in. In all honesty, it wasn't until last summer that it really started to sink in. The Grand Wabana Inn, which unfortunately burned down last winter, but Alfred Hines is a friend of mine, and he said, if you've got any old stock that you'd like to try and move, I'd be pleased to have it up here. So I went through the business of getting jewelry cleaned and boxed and inventoried, and with some help to get it up to Alfred's. And even that little bit of work, I was played right. I mean, that took days to do, for
Mhm.
starters. I couldn't do it in one day. And that's when the reality really started to set in, and I was crushed for a while. I I was really quite crushed because I had I had waited so long and had such a short span of time. But so I had my little grieving process over that.
Mhm.
And I don't cry about it anymore. Now, having said all that, recently I'm trying to clear out my studio a bit, and I came across a handful of the stories that I wrote for the story cards for the story pendant series I used to do.
Right.
And I read two of the stories silently to myself out there, and I burst into tears. So I clearly am not entirely over it yet, but I'm getting there. I think it's because it was such a joyful activity for me, and I was always constantly amazed. And I got reminded last summer by a few people who bought pieces from the restaurant who came to the house just to meet me before they left Belle Island again. They wanted to meet the person who had made the beautiful thing that they had bought at the inn. There's magic there. Bruno. And I think that that is what I miss the most, the magical connection between the maker and the people who appreciate what we make. I think that that is the piece that I will probably miss the most, because I mean, I'll still make things for friends and family, but you kind of aren't as surprised when there's a magical exchange between people who love you. But when it's somebody you've never laid eyes on before, it kind of sets you back on your heels and makes you go, wow, that I can create something out of bits and bobs that means this much to someone, or that resonates with someone like this. That's pure magic. And that is the piece that that is the unexpected joy I discovered when I first put myself out there and started doing it part-time in 2012. And that is the piece I will miss the most. No doubt.
I can only imagine. And I mean, I'm not in the province for that long, and like I met you briefly through the plantation, and then we had the biggest opportunity to talk on a potential show that you're going to have in the gallery, and the joy that you brought to the room when you talked about your work and you talked about your pieces, and like the quality of your work, that was incredible. And like
Thank you.
I'm a great admirer of you as a person and you as a maker. I'm cheering up right
Thank
now.
you. So am I.
um,
No, it means a lot to me. Like I felt like an imposter for the longest time. And I remember, I think it was the Christmas craft show of 2017, the Newfoundland and Labrador Historical Association. Gosh, I think I got their name right. They do an award at the craft show every
yeah,
year, and I applied. And I remember when they started talking about the person who won, I started to tear up in the chair. And it was like, that was the moment when I can tell you, that was the moment that I stopped feeling like an imposter.
wow.
And because I didn't feel, you know, I mean, even at the plantation, it's like I was surrounded by so many talented, beautiful people. And every day I went there, I felt like I had to work to belong there, not because of anything they said or did, but I just felt so lucky to be there. And I didn't get over my imposter syndrome until that Christmas craft show. But since then, it's like they say that it's so easy to get out of contact with people you work with. And especially relationships formed late in adulthood, they're not as durable. That's
Mhm.
just the way of things. But the warmth that I feel from the craft community, that my craft community, is still there. It's still real. I get messages from people. I might post a picture of something cheesy I've done at home, and it's the same lovely group of people who always comment, and whether it's a food picture or something goofy with the dog or what have you, it's like I'm here, you know, in self-imposed isolation, haven't left the island since the 25th of freaking February, but I still feel connected to all you guys, and it's worth its weight in gold. And so it's, if have any advice to anybody's out there who's ever considered being a maker, don't wait. Don't presume you're going to have unlimited time, because holy shit, look what happened to me. And regardless of the tough road that it might seem like it is, and it really is sometimes, the community you connect with, it's worth its weight in gold. And I wouldn't
Yeah.
trade it for the world.
I think that's one thing that kept me in Newfoundland. Like there is such an embrace of the new and people that are doing something different. They see potential in you and they want you to keep going. And yeah,
Yes.
no, I totally agree with you on that. And the magic, yeah, for sure. Like I think the magic that anything that you do and you put out there, like if one person connects, I think that's the important thing. Like at least one person will connect with that and will resonate with that. I was going to ask you for an advice for someone that is starting, but like you just gave that.
Oops. Sorry.
It's okay.
I mentioned I had coffee just before this interview.
um I think that like we come to an end of these conversation, and is there anything that you'd like to put out there? Like I know that you said in the beginning, like pace yourself, know what you're doing. You'll also comment on the amount of work that goes behind being a craftsperson. It's not just
Yes.
like the actual making, it's like you are your boss, your administrator, your accountant,
Hmm.
your social media person, your
Hmm.
PA.
Yep.
Yeah, you're all in one. So, is there anything that you haven't said to us yet that you think is important for all of us in the craft community to hear?
I know that I've been watching a lot of the government updates in this COVID-19 situation, and we're not out of the woods yet. And while some makers will be able to continue generating some small income from online sales, that's not the bulk of what we rely on here in Newfoundland and Labrador, at least not yet. And there's a letter I'm going to write in my future, and I would encourage other makers to consider doing the same. Is that just like all the hospitality Newfoundland and Labrador producers need to be supported to get back on their feet following this current situation, it's the same thing with makers, because culture doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's an expression of what people do, and makers are a huge part of that cultural engine in this province. But I'm not seeing it's almost like most of the help that's out there is geared to assisting more traditional concepts of business, as opposed to the sole proprietor maker business. And I worry about how many people are going to be left standing when this is all over. Like I said, if there, I said to Jennifer, I said, the irony is here right now is that I'm on Canada Pension Disability. And while I have my issues with how that's indexed, but the fact of the matter is I at least have some income coming in. A lot of makers don't know how they're going to qualify right now. And I have a serious problem with that, considering what makers contribute to the fabric of this province and the communities in which they live. So if I have any lasting advice, it's guys, band together and get fucking militant, because while you've got time on your hands and you're not as busy as you might otherwise be, start writing to political leaders and make sure that they hear you. Because if there's money enough to bail out a friggin' pipeline, there's money enough to help out people like us. And I say us in this because it's like, you're makers, and I will always be looking whenever I see those types of news posts, like checking to see, okay, what's in it for the makers?
Hmm.
Because, I've been in your shoes. So
Yeah.
yeah, that would be my one piece of advice.
Well, thank you so much for this time together.
Oh, thank you, Bruno. It's been a
And
pleasure.
we're gonna be putting some photos of your past work in these interviews so people can know you. I do know that you have a few pieces still in the Craft Council shop if people want to check that out. And do you have any pieces anywhere else if people want to?
I shut everything down and canceled my insurance effective December 31st. So
Okay.
the answer, unfortunately, would be no.
Okay.
At least for now. Like I said, I don't know. I don't know what my future medically holds, but if things change, I'll let you know.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
All right. Take care. Bye bye.